Hello, everyone. You're listening to Cinema 5000. My name is Mallory. This is my podcast. I'm going to be talking to you about 7 films I recently saw on this new episode. I know it's been a couple of weeks, but we're back in the swing of summer. July is happening. I went to the theaters. We need to talk. We are currently at 5,825 films, and we'll start with The Monkey from 2025, directed by Osgood Perkins. The tagline is, "Everybody dies, and that's fucked up." When twin brothers find a mysterious wind-up monkey, a series of outrageous deaths tear their family apart. 25 years later, the monkey begins a new killing spree, forcing the estranged brothers to confront the cursed toy. So in the latter years of the picture, the brothers Hal and Bill Shelbourne, they are played by Theo James. Their mother, Tatiana Maslany, passed away a long while ago, and it's possible that the boys experienced her death in witnessing it and her passing and their father's demise in some respect because of this monkey. And the deaths in this film are portrayed in a very lighthearted fashion, even though some of them are quite gruesome and horrifying. But I feel like the way that this movie discusses grief and also deals with tragedy is supposed to be somewhat, from a humorous slant, but also with a little bit of recollection, though the tone I don't think works. It does not work for me. And then these deaths as they occur, the impact of them as they're happening, it's so repetitious in the way that the styling is kind of done. Like, there's not really any surprises, even though they're all kind of unique in their own way. The impact for me as viewer, it just kind of felt like I was watching the, "Oh no, you killed Kenny, you bastards," thing, "Oh my god, you killed Kenny, you bastards," from South Park. That, was a thing that happened in every South Park episode. And it just feels like this movie, in doing this continuous thing of, how's someone gonna get splattered all over, just, it feels like it just doesn't work for me. Like, the humor in this, the way that it achieves these kills, it all feels like a big nothing. And its adaptation of the Stephen King short story, I feel like it just feels like a wasted opportunity. And I'm not a fan of Osgood Perkins' other films. Longlegs and Blackcoat's Daughter. Gretel and Hansel was okay, but that's also another movie where there's so much effort towards what the visual language of the film is, but nothing towards the actual story. And in here we have an actual story. It's something I'm familiar with. I've read a lot of Stephen King in my day, from the short stories like Bachman Books and Night Shift and other things, and then some of his actual books. So I'm familiar with the tone of what Stephen King can offer, and as far as adaptations go, of his works, this is probably one of my least favorite. I just don't think this is successful. I don't think it's amusing. I wasn't really into anything that was happening here, and I don't think Theo James is very good as well, and I'm just going to stay away from Osgood Perkins. I know he's got another movie coming out later this year, and he is just not my thing. So I had to give this 1 star. Yeah, it's a lot of missed opportunity for me here in this, especially the humor. I just found the tone of this to be very perplexing and not very entertaining. So The Monkey from 2025, directed by Osgood Perkins, 1 star from me. I would say do not bother unless you are a fan of Perkins's work. Our next film is Tuff from 1985, directed by Fritz Kirsch. The tagline is, "Meet Morgan Hiller. He's a rebel about to become a hero." A new guy in a Los Angeles high school, Morgan does some singing and fights hotshot Nick over disco dancer Frankie. James Spader plays Morgan Hiller. Disco dancer Frankie is played by Kim Richards, who you might recognize. She's one of the Real Housewives. Hotshot Nick is played by Paul Mones. And along the way, we do meet another high schooler, Jimmy, who's played by Robert Downey Jr. But this movie, I had never seen this, and I don't think I'd ever really heard anybody talk about it. It's really kind of trying to make James Spader like James Dean, rebel without a cause kind of thing. And also, he's the new kid in town, so he's not from around these parts, and there's some bad boys and bad girls. So what's he gonna do? Is he gonna fit in, or is he gonna be an outsider? And how's he gonna defend himself, especially when he has a thing for Frankie, who's clearly with Nick? This is goofy. It just doesn't really come together, and I think the story as it's done on screen is just really nothing of note. There's nothing really compelling about it, and it's doing very, very familiar stuff. And in fact, I was reminded a lot of the movie Class of 1984, which is a bit more tough and gruesome and nasty. This has its moments of trying to be a little rough and tough as far as like, how bad high school can be, like in the movies. Uh, but I think its biggest downfall, besides being really nothing of note, is that there are these music sequences that have like these times that interrupt the story and where things are happening because they go to a nightclub or something like that. And the music just goes on and on and on. And I don't think we really need to be focusing on like entire musical sequences of like kind of mediocre 80s music. Like it's nothing great. It's nothing fun. It's just kind of lame. And there's multiple moments where this happened that I just was kind of like, is this a musical movie or is it like just a teen drama, and has some musical moments because they just overtake so much of it. I expected at some point there to be like a battle with music that was like a real like musical performance thing, a little more involved, because otherwise it's just like these interruptions that happen like really drag the film out, and I was just kind of like, what are we doing here? And this is a long movie. It's 112 minutes, and I don't think it's worth your time at all. Only if you're a James Spader completionist, which I might be. Let's see how much of James Spader's filmography I've seen according to Letterboxd. Well, it says I've seen 21 of 49 projects. Some of the things I have not seen, you might be able to understand. Like, let's say I haven't seen the movie Curtain Call from 1998. I do know what that is, though. And other smaller things like The Stick Up from 2002. There is this movie he did in the year 2000 called Slow Burn that has Minnie Driver in it, and I know what it is because the video store I worked at had it on VHS, but I didn't know he was in it. I like James Spader. Is this movie worth watching if you're a big James Spader fan? I'm gonna say maybe not. Only if you're like, I gotta see everything he did, but this is 1985 James Spader. I mean, you could do worse. So maybe he helps the rating a little bit here. I gave Tuff 2 stars. It's something I just sort of grabbed on Tubi one night. Was like, James Spader, how bad could it be? It's just not good. It's a bit of a waste. And I don't recommend you look it up on Hoopla or Tubi, but that's where it is if you want to watch it. It's got to be on other streaming services too, right? Well, it says Plex and Pluto TV. That's no surprise. But yeah, Tuff Turf, 1985, directed by Fritz Kirsch, gave this one 2 stars. Up next is The Beyond from 1981, directed by Lucio Fulci. The tagline is Beyond Death, Beyond Evil, Beyond the Dreaded Gates of Hell. A young woman inherits an old hotel in Louisiana where, following a series of supernatural accidents, she learns that the building was built over one of the entrances to hell. Our lead character, Lisa, played by Katrina McCall, has, this hotel that she's like trying to fix up and get in the groove of like maybe opening, and wacky shit happens and nasty shit happens, and it reminded me so much of like the Amityville Horror movie, which is not a good movie, but it's one of those stories, much like here, where just weird occurrences happen and people get hurt and they fall off of things, and it's like, oh my gosh, how did this happen? It doesn't really have much of a story at all, but I think the best thing about this movie is how disgusting it is. It really leans into the nastiness that you can come to expect from 70s and 80s Italian horror pictures. Like, it's not an Argento film, but it's something that wants to deal with like the supernatural spookiness and, maybe bodies rising from the dead kind of behavior, and then blood. Yeah, lots of blood, lots of icky, lots of nasty. I don't have a lot to say about this one, but I will say if you're looking for something that is going to be a little gruesome and maybe a little spooky, but not totally spooky, like we're talking about, underworld, like hell on earth maybe kind of things. I don't think I'm explaining this well, but I would recommend The Beyond. As much as like I don't have a lot to say about this one, it really hit the spot. I was just looking for something like weird and, just a bit like supernatural and devilish, and it hit the mark for me. I ended up watching this one on Tubi. Of course I did, but it's also on a lot of different streaming services, like every single one you could ever think of. AMC Plus, Peacock, Pluto TV, of course, Shudder, Canopy, um, any one of those things. If you go on justwatch.com and you look up The Beyond from 1981, you'll get it. But I will say, as much as this was kind of like an up in the air kind of thing, and it reminded me a little bit of the movie The Antichrist from like the mid 70s, not Antichrist, Lars von Trier, but another Italian horror film where just wacky shit happens. There's just, the spiritual satanic things, that's not a word, satanic things. The ending for this one though, I really liked, and this is such a movie that has like really kind of go for broke like nastiness. I almost wonder if it like get remade. It feels like a story that could be remade, just inheriting this old hotel and you don't know that its place is that cursed or unholy, so to speak. I like the ending for this one a lot. So yeah, The Beyond from 1981, directed by Lucio Fulci, gave this 3 stars. I say I like this a lot. I mean, it's a 3-star picture, but I found a lot to enjoy about it. Up next, we have Ballerina from 2025, directed by Len Wiseman. The tagline is, "Vengeance has a new face." Taking place during the events of John Wick, Chapter 3, Parabellum, Eve Maccaro begins her training in the assassin traditions of the Rosca Roma. Ana de Armas plays Eve Maccaro, and she is our titular ballerina. I was never really convinced that she was a ballerina. I was always convinced, however, that she was someone who could hold a gun and shoot people. Now, unfortunately, this movie feels very much like it was kind of chopped together in post-production, and they maybe had to do research here and there, reshoots here and there, not research, to make this a more satisfying picture. I will say, like, the first like half hour of so of this, I was just kind of like, okay, we're kind of doing this thing. There were a lot of events that happened that weren't really explained, and it kind of makes me wonder, what maybe things are taken out, where the scripting changes were. Like, I have a lot of questions, though I think the last 45 minutes of this are fairly successful as far as like an entertaining action picture, and it really fits the mold at that point of like what you kind of want out of a John Wick film. And yeah, Keanu Reeves is in this. It's no surprise. Ian McShane is in this as well, and we also have Angelica Houston back. She's at the the Ballerina Academy. Oh yes, she's mostly seen talking on the phone. Another thing is Gabriel Byrne is in this film as well. He's one of the bad guys because Eve's on a quest to find the people that did bad things to her family. Dun dun dun. If you're familiar with I keep saying John Wick, not John Wick. If you're familiar with the John Wick motion pictures, this should really not surprise you, but it should also entertain you to some degree. You might think it's on the lower scale of those films. I mean, there's some obvious issues with it, but I think it succeeds in having good set pieces, good action, performances, kind of so-so. Ana de Armas is fine here. She's not really great, she's not really bad, but I don't think it really holds a candle to like her best performances, which is like, in my mind, her best performance is the small part she had in No Time to Die. She's like really, really terrific in that, and I like her as a screen presence, but she is in some ways a little underserved here. But, this isn't like a total waste of time, I guess. I give this 2.5 stars. I feel like it's not like a complete film, and it's probably only better than John Wick Part 2 or John Wick 2, But, yeah, there's things about the ending that I think work and what it eventually gets to. And I was never really bored. It's just pretty obvious that, like, this is kind of a step down to the movie that this is supposed to take place in the universe of, Chapter 3, Parabellum, which I quite enjoyed a lot. So, Ballerina from 2025, directed by Len Wiseman. I gave this 2.5 stars. Yeah. So, up next we have The Hot Spot from 1990, directed by Dennis Hopper. The tagline is "Safe is never sex. It's dangerous." Weird tagline. Safe is never sex. It's dangerous. Okay. Upon arriving to a small town, a drifter quickly gets in trouble with the local authorities and the local women after he robs a bank. John Johnson is our central character here, Harry Maddox. He's working at a used car dealership, and he's selling cars, and he's spotting dames around, including Gloria Harper, who's played by Jennifer Connelly, and he suspects that Gloria might be in a little bit of trouble. She's an attractive young lady, and she has unfortunate dealings with one guy in town who owes some money for back payment on a car. He also runs into Dolly Harshaw, who's played by Virginia Madsen. She's definitely a femme fatale in this picture, looking the part, talking the talk with her heavy accent, and being a seductress. She really has her eye out on Harry and is into him. But Harry's dealings with the women is also aided by his greed and his need for money, and as he robs a bank, he thinks he'll get away with it. He thinks he's got no problems because he's kind of tied things up pretty tight when it comes to his operation and how it goes down. However, there are some folks in the town who know a bit more about Harry than he thinks of himself and know how to dial his number and get him hooked. Now, this is kind of quintessential noir behavior of, this man, these women, just bad business in town, and, maybe somebody gets shot randomly and things are going down. Somebody's getting, getting some pleasure here and there. I don't know how to explain it. As much as it is kind of hard to explain without spoiling it, it also rides a lot of the conventions you kind of get with the genre of your noir stories and the eroticism that's sort of portrayed in the South. It's called the hot spot. It's a little warm here. It gets a little steamy. I think Don Johnson is okay here, and his eventual result of what happens with his bank robbery, it kind of works, the casting here. But I will say Virginia Madsen and Jennifer Connelly are just really terrific against him. They're cast perfectly. I think their performances are good. And Virginia Madsen specifically, she doesn't have a lot of screen time, but she leaves her mark on this motion picture. And yeah, it's a conventional kind of story, but I think there's enough here to really enjoy. I kind of feel like it's slightly disappointing in some respect. I wanted a little more to chew on here just because it's kind of movie I've seen before. Nevertheless, I would recommend The Hot Spot from 1990. I gave it 3 stars. It's got a recognizable cast. We've got Jerry Hardin, Charles Martin Smith, William Sadler, Barry Corbin. Yeah, some faces you might have seen in movies from the 80s and 90s. Jack Nance, Leon Rippey. I mean, those names might mean nothing to you, but when you see them on screen, it's people that you kind of know from movies of this era. And if you're not into noir motion pictures, a girl and a guy and a gun and maybe some bad stuff going down, maybe people getting, their way and maybe learning the hard way. If that kind of older older timey picture, Double Indemnities and The Big Sleep and such, if those are maybe too old style for you, this might be the kind of movie you're into, especially since this is from 1990. So it's a little bit more current in its aspect of how it talks about these people together, but it also has a little bit of that old timey feel, sort of dipped in there. It's a good film. I gave it 3 stars, like I said. That's The Hot Spot. And guess what? I watched it on Tubi. It's a fun one. It's a little sleazy. It's a little nasty. It's kind of the perfect movie to watch with the windows open on a hot summer night. Oh no, turn that AC off. We want our motion pictures steamy. Up next, we're going to talk about Being Maria from 2024, directed by Jessica Palud. The tagline is the true story of Maria Schneider behind the making of Last Tango in Paris. A young, struggling actress lands her dream role in a film by an emerging Italian director, starring alongside an American superstar. What begins as her big breakthrough quickly turns into a living hell. This film stars Anna Maria Bartolomei as Maria Schneider. I first saw her in the film Happening, directed by Audrey Dewan some years ago, 3 years ago. And I really liked her performance in that. And I like her here as Maria Schneider. If you're not familiar with Maria Schneider, she starred in the film Last Tango in Paris opposite Marlon Brando, and she was just a young actress. And it came out some years ago that, unfortunately, Maria Schneider was abused on screen, and the tears she had were not acting tears. They were real tears of pain because she was being assaulted by Marlon Brando under the watch of Bernardo Bertolucci and everybody else in the film crew. Like, that is just so terrible. So this movie wants to talk about Maria's life. It's based on the biography of her done by her cousin, Vanessa Schneider, and we start at the beginnings of her acting career as just a young woman who's, like, you know, in awe of, like, certain performers. She comes from, like, not a very stable home life where, like, her mother kicks her out and she ends up living with her father. And then she gets the role of a lifetime in Last Tango in Paris. But as I've said, this was not a good time for her, unfortunately. She was abused on set, and when the filming was done, Bertolucci acted like it was no big deal. You know, they did this to, you know, get her reaction as opposed to telling her what was going to happen because, oh, then you wouldn't be, like, you know, doing it the way we'd want you to. You know, they wanted her to react in a very negative way on screen, and it's heartbreaking. It's so terrible, but it just goes to show that, you know, if there's no accountability when it comes to how films are made and nobody there to advocate for performers, then abuse can happen and people are taking advantage of. Marlon Brando in this film is played by Matt Dillon. I guess it's a good performance. Like, I wasn't thinking it was Matt Dillon, but even so, he's playing Marlon Brando and he's, like, so scary in this. Like, ugh, it's awful. And Maria Schneider wanted to speak out about the fact that she was abused on set, but publicists were just like, you know, you can't do that. We're just here to talk about the film and how great it was to make. And then as this film portrays her in the years after, you know, she gets into, you know, relationships here and there, but she also becomes addicted to drugs and her life is very difficult and she's left, you know, really broken by this moment and the industry. And I think the movie falls into, like, some traps of, like, cliches that you kind of see of someone having, like, a downfall after something that happens to them that's so horrifying. But then again, I don't know. Is this something that is just exactly what this book is? If it's based on this book, is that exactly how it happens? I'm left questioning some things. Regardless, I did enjoy watching this. Like I said, Anna Maria Bartolome's performance is really good. But it does fall into conventions, like things you kind of expect in the filmmaking. It's not really going for it, I think, in the stylings, but maybe it wants to be more honest about the things that Maria's going through and really put a face to what her, you know, experience is. So I'm, like, of two minds. And then I'm kind of like, well, maybe they should have just done a documentary. But then it's like, well, if you can just do a narrative film, why not do a narrative film? It's like I'm kind of conflicted on this. I don't think it's a bad movie. I give this 2.5 stars. Like I said, I really didn't have a difficult time watching this. And, you know, I can understand if somebody would have a lot of problems with this movie and also really not want to watch it. Like, absolutely do not watch this movie if you think it might trigger you, because it is very horrifying what does happen to Maria Schneider, and her life was difficult, and it's really too bad. But I do like Maria Schneider, and I like this performance here of portraying her. I also really like her in the movie The Passenger, if you haven't seen that one, where she's opposite Jack Nicholson, the Antonioni picture. That's a really great one. So if you haven't seen anything she's in, maybe watch that instead of watching Last Tango in Paris. Being Maria from 2024, directed by Jessica Palou. 2.5 stars from me. So our last film is Elio from 2025. The tagline is, "They asked for our leader, they got him." Elio, a space fanatic with an active imagination, finds himself on a cosmic misadventure where he must form new bonds with eccentric alien life forms, navigate a crisis of intergalactic proportions, and somehow discover who he truly is meant to be. This is a very entertaining film that is mostly geared towards children. Our central character, Elio, is just a youngster who loves thinking about the outer space, planets, and maybe the possibility of aliens, universes beyond what we know. And he uses a CB radio at times to try to send out his message, "Take me with you because my life at home isn't so great." Unfortunately for Elio, he's lost his parents and he's living with his aunt Olga, who's voiced by Zoe Saldana. Elio, you know, he's just a kid. He doesn't know what the world is like, but things are tough for him. However, his message is received, and received it is. Elio finds himself being taken by the aliens to his wishes, and on the planet, well, not really planet, but in the aliens, in his experience with them, he befriends Glorden, who is much like Elio, someone who doesn't have, like, quite the right life path that his his seeking parent overlord really favors. So Glorden and Elio find themselves, being buds, being pals, and really, maybe going on adventures together and other things. But there's some unfortunate situations that happen when Glorden's father, Lord Grygon, wants to overtake the aliens that are Elio's friends. I'm not explaining this very well, but there is some space, drama happening here. All the while on land, Ogosalis, Elio's aunt, is like, where is Elio? Oh wait, Elio's here. Or is it Elio? There's just a lot of drama to do with her job because her work is manning the communications in space and satellites and such, and sure enough, Elio's fascination with aliens then connects with that. It makes a lot more sense when you watch it as a motion picture. I just found a lot of it overwhelming when it came to the alien stuff. I will say that it's a visually very beautiful film, but I think it got a little bit fast paced and a little dramatic and zany, but in the right way for kids and their imagination. And Elio is a very smart child, and I liked that about him a lot. There was nothing like Elio isn't good enough. No. Elio knows what his lane is, and he wants to stay in his lane, and that includes befriending aliens. I was reminded of the movie Contact quite a bit for this film, another movie that starts out with a young child on a radio trying to reach other dimensions and such, and then grows up fascinated by satellites, and then communications come in. There could be life out there, and there's such more of an actualization in Elio's experience, but I bet you could do a double feature of Contact and Elio, and everybody in the audience would be very happy. I unfortunately did read that there were some changes to the story. I didn't read the whole thing from Variety, I think it was Variety that published that there were some changes to the storyline about Elio and his life. That really disappoints me, to think that they would have to sanitize the story because of whatever motivations Pixar has. I gotta read that, to see if I'm gonna get angry about it or whatever, but I don't know. But as it stands, I found Elio to be very charming and lighthearted, enough going on for youngsters, but enough to sort of touch your heart. Yeah, I cried a little bit. This idea of found family that this movie wants to portray, I think, is just on the mark. It's just, there's stuff that you might want to explore, and people might be like, why would you be into that? But this movie celebrates that, and I think that's just great. It's a great message for children, and it's a delightful portrayal when it comes to how this movie does that. Visually, yeah, it's right. I like the vocal performances here, and it's a good time. So Elio, I don't know what else to say. I know I didn't explain it very well, but I gave this 3.5 stars. This is probably one of the better Pixar films in recent years. I like this a little more than Elemental, which I liked, a decent amount. It's much better than Inside Out 2. I don't know what I would rank this as better than. I don't know. It's been some years since I've really thought about Pixar films, but is this maybe my favorite Pixar film since Up? Yeah, it probably is. And that's from 2009. Yeah, I think this is pretty good. Goes up there with Up. Yeah. Well, that is the episode. What films are coming soon that I'll talk about? I don't know if I'm gonna go see Superman. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna go see Mission Impossible. I don't know. We'll see. But I do know for a fact that tonight I'm going to be watching something on a physical disc, because unfortunately the fiber line was snapped off my house today thanks to all the wonderful construction in my neighborhood. Somebody wasn't paying attention, doing the work. Thank you very much. But I've got a lot of movies I can watch. Possibilities are endless. And there's a bunch of new stuff on streaming that I haven't gotten the chance to watch yet. So we'll talk next week. Again, my name is Mallory. This is my podcast. And if you go to cinema5000.com, you can read all the links and blog updates that I do there. I also link to the YouTube on there and do YouTube uploads on the blog. If you're on YouTube, Cinema 5000 Podcast. If you're on Bluesky, Cinema 5000. And if you want, you can also send an email to cinema5kpod@gmail.com. And I will respond if you have any questions, queries, and things. I'll talk to you soon about whatever movies I see on the next episode. All right, thanks. Bye.